Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it is the CEO series where we bring together the most phenomenal leaders from across the globe to share their career journey. And our guest today is a longtime friend, Dr. Rochelle Ford. She's the Chief Executive Officer for Page Society, which is a global community of senior communication leaders. A distinguished academic and nonprofit executive, she's previously served as the president of Dillard University. She was a professor at Syracuse University, Howard University, as well as her alma mater, Elon University. She's a recognized champion of strategic communication and leadership development across all sectors. So, with that, I welcome Dr. Ford. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful today. Thank you for having me on this program.
I, as I said, I've been following your career, and I say, you know, professor, college president. Now I'm the president, CEO of Pace Society. So walk us through that journey. How did that start from Elon University?
Well, my actual start, I would actually go back to Ohio, where I grew up. My dad had been originally a high school teacher and then worked for AT&T and was one of the first African Americans serving in that role. And when I was in high school, I was a cheerleader and I was in student council and worked on the newspaper and all. And I was like, Dad, how do I make this into a career? And he said, there's something called public relations. Somebody does that at my job.
Ooh.
And I fell in love with that industry. And so, but at the same time, I've always wanted to give back and to develop people.
Okay.
I didn't want to be a K-12 teacher. I love my own children, but I discovered I wasn't necessarily fond with other people's kids.
Right.
And so I decided to become a college professor where I could teach in the industry that I loved and help to develop the next generation of talent. And I graduated from Howard University, worked in the nonprofit area with AARP and some professional associations, and went and got my doctorate while I was teaching, and then came back to my alma mater at Howard University as a professor, went all the way up as a tenured professor, was recruited to do administrative work, and I like to solve problems.
Okay.
And how do I make good things even better? So that brought me into administration after teaching, and did that at Howard and then at Syracuse, and then was recruited to come and be the dean at Elon University. And I was the second dean, and so was taking a program that was founded by my predecessor and that was become nationally ranked, and they had grown so rapidly. They're like, how can you help us to advance into this maturity? And I helped them to do so, and to be ranked as the top public relations program in the nation.
Oh.
Then was recruited to be a university president and returned back to my HBCU roots, going all the way south to New Orleans. And I no longer was teaching public relations, administering a PR department, but running and applying all the things that I had learned in terms of reputation, in terms of communications leadership, and applying it as a CEO of a university. And as much as I love New Orleans, I loved all of my students, my faculty, the alumni, the staff there. I also miss being closer to my family and friends in the Northeast and the mid part of our country here in North Carolina. So I came and was recruited to lead the organization, which I had joined 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the transferable skills as an educator, someone who invests in people's growth, that's what I'm doing at Page too, is taking some of the world's leading executive who are chief communication officers, who are agency CEOs, who are the top scholars, and helping them to be better, helping them to have a community that really can help us advance business and society. So it's much like what I did with college students and Ph.D. students and what I did with my faculty colleagues and creating an environment for them to thrive. I'm doing the same thing on a global scale and helping to make sure this professional organization creates thought leadership that's going to help elevate the role of the chief communications officer as a strategic business leader among their peers. And so having been a CEO, I'm supporting CEOs
That's amazing because as a college professor and you transition to a CEO, was there a defining moment? Sometimes imposter syndrome can come in, and am I CEO material? I know the first time I made CEO, I struggle over that. Am I CEO material because I've been consulting, doing this, doing that? Can I move to that? So was there a defining moment?
I think the most difficult moment for me was going from a dean of a school of communications, which I was reporting into a provost or vice president of academic affairs and the university president, to am I ready to be a university president?
Mm.
And I think that was, I wouldn't say, well, maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome there, right? Am I ready? And what the other sitting president said, you're going to never feel ready. You just do it.
That's right. Yeah.
And so making that jump, I did professional development programs. So the executive leadership program for HBCU leadership was through Clark Atlanta University. And I completed that. And that gave me a real close look into what it takes to be operating as a chief executive officer of a university setting.
Mm-hmm.
And also the program at Harvard University helped me with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the transition, it was a mindset that I've grown up in higher ed, had not worked in the private sector on a full-time capacity since 1993.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or 94. And so it was like, am I really going to do this? Am I going to leave the comfort of the sector that I know how to operate and go back into nonprofit?
Mm.
And I realized when I looked at all the criteria that was required, the qualifications and the job description, I was like, I've done all of this except for be a CEO of an agency or a chief comms officer. But as a CEO of a university, I had agencies reporting into me. I had a chief communications and marketing officer. I was like, Rochelle, just put your name in the hat. The worst thing can happen is that you get it.
Yeah.
And then you got to figure it out.
Okay.
Which is the same thing that happened as I became a university president.
But my father told me something like that. He says, always ask for everything you want. He said, because there's only three things can happen. They could say yes, no, and maybe. So you still move forward and just try it. And the first thing you can do is I go back to what I've been doing before.
Your dad and my dad must have read the same book because he is the one who told me that as well.
Really?
Yes. He says the worst thing can happen is you get it. Because if they say no, you still have your current, position and nothing has changed. If they say maybe, then there's a possibility. But if you don't put your name in the hat, you're always going to wonder, could I have done that?
Yeah, take the step forward and move beyond that. So you're talking about your father as being a consistent cheerleader in moving you forward. Who else in your life was there to just want to bounce something off of somebody? It could have been a friend. Sometimes we get into these situations and say, who do I need to talk to? Who's my
So I like to say I have my own little personal board of advisors, my own little personal corporate board, right?
Yeah.
And I would say one of the founding members of it, you can actually see his picture over my shoulder here, Ofield Dukes. So Ofield Dukes, he was multifaceted leader. He's actually in the Hall of Fame of the Page Society. But Ofield started off as a journalist, covered the March on Washington, then started working for all of the presidential candidates since Kennedy. And so he worked in the Kennedy Humphreys Johnson administration and then the Johnson Humphreys administration. Then he worked on all the political campaigns of the Democratic candidates up until he passed away just as Obama was running for office and being elected. But Ofield was the first person who was a sponsor. So in other words, some people talk about mentors. Some
Yeah.
people talk about, role models. Oldfield was a sponsor where he got to know me when I was a student. And he says, your credentials speak for themselves. I need you to show up here. And it was his reputation that validating me opened the door for me to walk into opportunities.
Wow.
And so he had his own consulting firm, Oldfield Dukes and Associates. He had Motown as a client. He had Lever Brothers as a client. He helped to establish the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. That was a client. And so Oldfield founded the Black Public Relations Society of Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And he's like, I want you to lead the student initiative. And I want you to help me with Clinton's inaugurations campaign. And I need you to get your other Howard students to come and work at the Congressional Black Caucus. And so he did that because he saw my leadership role as a student. And then he brought me along. And then even as he was growing older and was about to pass away, he says, I'm going to leave you with my, with all of my papers. And I want you to write my memoir. Wow. And so I edited his memoir. So that's the picture on the wall, is the cover of the book of his memoir. And so Oldfield, like I said, he's one of the members of my personal board of who I respect. He was a sponsor to me. But then also former professors, Dr. Barbara Hines, blonde hair, blue-eyed. She led her near entire career at Howard University running the public relations program. I call her my Howard mom. But she taught me a work ethic. She emphasized the importance of cross-cultural communication, being willing to be othered, because here she is, a Caucasian woman from Texas, leading the public relations program at Howard University, the mecca of higher education for African Americans. But she was willing to be othered, to be in that environment, to uplift the next generation. And that was meaningful, and we still talk. And there's many others like Lori George Billingsley, who became the chief diversity officer, global chief diversity officer for Coca-Cola, and is now doing corporate board work. Lori, I give her a call and she answers my questions, even how to have additional executive presence. And maybe you need to have someone who helps you style you. I know women think about. You probably haven't had to think about what kind of hairstyle and clothing do you need to wear. But women do, and we get judged.
I was on a flight coming from Dubai, New York, 14-hour flight. And so as we were getting the coming into New York space, the young lady sitting next to me, she pulled out her kit and she did the whole makeup thing. And she was going through all of this and looking back at the mirror. And she looked at me and we both laughed. I said, it's so easy to being a man. I said, because all I got to do is just put the hot towel on and I'm cool and I'm moving on. No need to worry about anything else.
Yeah. It tends to be different. But, that is something that there are gender differences and expectations of how we show up, be it because, of gender, because of being a woman or a male, and the expectations that come along and the judgments that people make about you. And the same way that happens with people of color and people of, various hues and their complexion, they're judged differently, and how you show up, it matters.
How do you navigate those moments? You talked about the board of directors. How do you navigate those moments when you're sitting there and, board presentation or whatever it is? And sometimes those little thoughts come in. I always say this coach up here can be detrimental at times. How do you personally navigate those moments?
This is going to sound funny. When I'm going into an environment to present an idea, to talk or, engage with people, remembering one, I center myself in prayer before I engage in any situation. My strength and confidence is not from my head or my heart, it's from my faith, right? That God has a plan for me, you know what I mean? And that is to prosper and not fail. So centering myself there. But then secondly, feeling confident in what I know and that I am prepared for a time such as this, right? But then the third, I'm kind of weird in the sense that, when I get nervous is after the fact.
Really?
It's like, did I land it? Did my points resonate? Are they going to walk away with?
What are they walking away with? Key
Right?
point. Yeah.
I mean, let's just be honest. I've had panic attacks after meetings.
Really?
Yeah, where I'm like, oh, did I go over well? And my friends are like, it's done, like, let it go. And I'm like, but, and so I don't know if that's strange or not, if other people do that, but I walk in generally with a host of confidence. And then when I leave, I'm like, oh Lord, what did I just do?
Oh wow, wow! That's the first time I've ever heard that because I do I do a lot of speaking opportunities across the globe, and my stomach tells me someone is introducing me, and I'm talking to myself. You're gonna nail it. You're gonna nail it. That's just when I'm nearing the end, and I know that I'm coming to the end. There's this burst of confidence that just comes through, and I say yes, yes, and I feel that. But going to that stage and standing on the sidelines before they tell you to come to the stage, that's my moment. So that's the first time I've heard that after.
It's okay to be the only one.
Okay, it's okay. It's all cool in doing that. So how did you, if you think of your leadership style, you started in university, so you had students as an audience, and then you had other deans as an audience.
Mhm.
Now you've got an executive team. Now you've got a board. Did the leadership philosophy change through those 4 to 5 sectors?
I wouldn't say that the philosophy changed. I think that my skill set and how I apply it might be slightly different because the purpose is different,
Okay.
right? What I'm trying to achieve. I think when you're in a classroom, you're somewhat of a sage on the stage, like you have the expertise and you're trying to bring others along and learning what you know, and you do co-creating, you learn from your students. I think when you're leading a team, it is establishing a vision and pulling them together to work towards that common goal. So there is still a level of persuasion, of knowledge that you share, but you are trusting the expertise that they bring to the table, and you're surrounding yourself with amazingly smart people to get the work done. I think when you become a CEO, you are working up and down in a very and balancing those multiple stakeholders. So one, the board is entrusting you with a vision, like to come up with a vision and to be able to implement it, but you have to convince them and earn their support that this is the right direction and be willing to pivot based upon their input, because at the end of the day, they have the fiscal, fiduciary responsibility as a board. And so you have to take that into consideration and making sure that your vision, your plans are in alignment with what they see, and they believe that you're going to add that benefit from a fiscal perspective, a mission vision, visionary, piece. And then be able to take that same skill set of finding the best team with expertise to enact it, but co-create it so they have ownership as well.
Yeah.
And there is a level of instruction, even like I did as a professor, to make sure that they are equipped with additional professional development, knowledge, etc., to be able to do their job.
Exactly. I love that because you focused on how to not only am I managing the seat, but how can I further develop this team and moving forward? And that anchors back into, you talked about the mentors in your life and how they develop you to move forward, as
Yes.
opposed to inheriting a team and you just keep moving on. Professional development, that's pretty cool in thinking that. Here's a question I wanted to ask you. You've gone through so many trajectories. What was one major challenge that you that kind of shaped everything that you maybe still anchored to, that you were able to make the leap, self doubt, whatever it is, but you were able to make the leap. But is there one major challenge that you faced in this esteemed career that you have?
One major challenge that I've had to overcome or to cross through, I would say, is necessary endings.
Okay.
It's a book, and I would say that that's been one, knowing when it is time to move to what's next.
Okay.
I remember one of the greatest disappointments is when I did not become the dean of the School of Communications at Howard after serving as the associate dean. I wanted that. That's what I thought was my job,
Mm,
right? I thought I was ready. I'd done what I needed to do, checked all the boxes, and then I didn't get it. And then the question was, okay, Rochelle, what do you feel like God's called you to do? And do you pivot here and do something else at Howard, or do you open yourself up for the possibilities? I never thought I would leave Howard University. But
okay.
then I got a call and was recruited to Syracuse. I'm like, I don't know anybody there. It is cold. It snowed like all the time.
Yeah, the weather is a consideration, not the skills, the weather.
I still take vitamin D to this day. It's very cloudy when it's not snowing. But
Yeah.
it was a necessary ending to Howard. But had I not left Howard, I would not have learned all that I did at Syracuse, one of the nation's preeminent universities, where I was catapulted into leadership roles and global. I became a Fulbright specialist. I worked in the provost office doing accreditation for the whole university. And then it was like, okay, am I going to become a dean here? And it was like, well, no, they had an amazing, African-American female leader there, and she wasn't going anyplace. And I was like, well, if I'm going to chair, well, the next thing is be a dean. Am I going to leave Syracuse, which I fell in love with? So it was another necessary ending that brought me to North Carolina to be the dean at Elon. And then it was the same thing. Well, I'm not going to be the president at Elon. Well, what comes next? And it was a necessary ending to go to Dillard in New Orleans. And now I'm still trying to lose weight from my years in New Orleans because they have amazing food.
I know, I know, I know.
But at the same time, it becomes necessary. And even with Dillard, being away from family,
Okay.
right? I had some health challenges.
Yeah.
And then the question is, can I heal here at this high level stress job in a city where I don't have any friends or family?
Yeah.
And it became a necessary ending. That as much as I love the students, as much as we were making progress in doing things, it was a necessary ending because my family, my health, my wellness, and being in a place where I had a full community to support me became a necessary ending that opened up a world of possibilities where now I'm advancing professionals at the most senior level and being able to mentor and sponsor and support the next generation as well.
Necessary endings. You just gave me flashbacks because I was on a job. I was number two. I just knew that number one job was for me. I did everything I could do, and they went outside to find someone else, and I quit. I, I quit after that. Didn't know how it was going to work out, and I ended up moving to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. A job offer came in, and I said if I would not have quit, I would have still been grinding it out in New York to commute every day. Now I travel the world. I was in Singapore last week. I'm scheduled to go to Hong Kong and all these kinds of things. So I love the necessary endings. I have to get the book because I have to read a little more about that. I didn't know there was a science behind it, but that's cool to know. From my side, how do you? I'm going to go back again to the trajectories you've gone through. What do you look for in identifying and nurturing? I'm going to say identifying first and then nurturing future leaders. Someone saw something in you and were able to pull you along. What do you look for? What is the secret sauce, if there is one from your side?
That's a really great question. What is the secret sauce? I think that I look for people with curiosity and who have a desire to learn and grow. I cannot make you want to learn. I cannot make you want to grow. You have to have that innately. Like you have to have that desire, right? But if you're someone who is complacent in where you are, that's not the person that I'm going to invest in. If they don't want to get beyond here, right? And there's some people who are like that, but I don't view that as a leadership quality.
Okay.
I view the people that I tend to mentor and I tend to invest in, they want to grow. There is a desire. They may not know how to get there. They may not know what they need, but they know that they need it. And they know that they have that innate curiosity of how do I get better? And so it's that introspection, that curiosity, that desire to grow. I can work with that. I can't work with I'm good.
Yeah. We good.
And I'm like, okay, you don't need me.
Yeah. I understand. I do a lot of leadership development work, and one of the key things that I always talk about is curiosity. How do you consistently learn? I mean, when you think of business today, you've been disrupted with innovation, all of disruption, AI, all these things coming through. How are you learning to stay ahead of the curve? And the key theme that comes out from a lot of the leaders is curiosity. I've always been curious. I always want to read something. And one of the questions I always ask people, what do you read? What are you reading? What podcasts are you listening to? How do you get better at what you do? And when I get that blank look to say, I'm so busy doing other things, I'm like, okay, I'll see you in 5 years because there's going to be a
It'd be
change.
obsolete.
It's obsolete and it's going to be over with over a period of time. Can you kind of give us a success story, someone you've worked with, and all of a sudden, whoa, they're here now, and you're sitting back and I knew it
Um,
that you would want to share.
yeah, one that I want to share. Well, there are so many. One of my very first students, with my first full-time teaching job, Kent Landers. He was a young man from Murrayville, Tennessee, and he kind of talked a little bit like that. Talented young man, and he ended up he was a member of the Public Relations Student Society of America. I was an advisor for. He then became the national conference chair for the Public Relations Society of America, ended up running for national office of that student group. He went on to do amazing internships. His career has kept going and going and going to now he's a top executive with the Hilton, company. And I remember when he was this kid from Murrayville. But the thing that I loved about Kent is that we couldn't have been more opposite. He from the South, Caucasian, young man, but he was willing to be mentored by me, a young African-American woman from Ohio, educated at HBCUs, and he was open and he wanted to grow and he would take advice and he would follow through. And to watch his career trajectory has been amazing. And a lot of people don't want to be mentored by people not like them.
I know. Tell me about
And
it.
he was, and his worldview, I think, was additionally shaped and had additional skills because of our relationship. And I too was changed because he was one of my first, Caucasian male that I had ever mentored before.
Okay.
And so it has been a mutually beneficial relationship over the years. And I'm amazingly proud of him and where he has gone.
Wow. When I look at the landscape today, and I'll just leave it as the landscape today, and you're a DEI specialist. Change is going through at rapid space inside the U.S. today. How do you say? I'm going to say, how do you stay ahead of the curve with all of the changes that's going through communication, the way we communicate? We've got social media, we've got websites, TikTok, all these messaging that we didn't have before.
Mhm.
How do you stay ahead of the curve?
Helps that I have, young people in my life, like my children who are now 31 and 26 and 20. And so they,
Welcome
they
to the
keep
club.
me
Welcome to the
up
club.
to date with language and things to explore. So I learn from my young people, but I also, I read a lot, listen to podcasts. I talk to my members about what's going on in their world, and then I follow up with that. Go to professional development, conferences and workshops, and listen to experts and listen to people who are not in my discipline, and being open to voices that you ordinarily wouldn't hear. And I read
Mhm.
things that are not that would not come up in my own little echo chamber. We live in them, so I force myself to
Okay.
listen and to read things that are outside of what my own political or faith tradition or what have you are. I force myself outside of my comfort zone to see what
Mm,
others are thinking and all.
mm. I'm going to say on average about 1 or 2 hours a day reading something. Article
Mhm.
comes up, I print it. I like to print things out. I don't like to read offline and all of. I want to hear, and I read and I mark it up. Every place in my house, either here or in Dubai, I've got yellow markers all over the place that I've marked things up. And this is why, I asked that question, because when you're leading, whether it's leadership development, whether it's leading a communication strategy for an organization, you have to be aware of what's going on around you. That's a 360 view of the world, as
Yeah.
opposed to that little vertical that we tend to, move into sometime. Um, was there anything lately that you've read or you've heard on a podcast that caused you to say, "Let me change something. Let me carry this forward"? Was that nugget that came up in that curiosity?
I, like many others, are trying to figure out which AI tools I will use,
Yeah.
how I will use it,
Yeah.
how, because I mean, I'm old school. Like both of us point to paper. I like paper, but I do have a smart pen now, so I can
Yeah.
still write.
Ooh,
And then it actually transcribes it into type, so then I can easily send it off to my
okay.
team,
Yeah.
which is awesome. But when I was looking at something and it was a video and it was comparing Chat GPT versus Claude versus Gemini and what you can use them for. And it made me think, okay, Rochelle, and then how do I ask better prompts? How do I engage with it? How do I feel comfortable that I can push a button and it can give me a first round analysis of something that might save me time and then go back and look at it,
Mm.
or compare my own analysis to something. And so I've begun to really rethink and be comfortable with using AI tools. And I tell you, I was humbled.
I know where you're going. We're cool.
This I did we did a survey, I pulled it into my spreadsheet, I was analyzing it, and my colleague said, "Hey, I had Gemini to summarize this." I was like, okay. So I spent hours, old school analysis, wrote up my findings, and then I read back his
Keep it.
Gemini,
Yeah.
and it was the same result. It was the
I know.
same.
I
And
know.
his took a button, and mine took quite a lot of time. Now, I still feel like I had the detail and understanding that Gemini could not provide because I had done the deep analysis.
Yeah.
And although the summary was the same, in order for me to be able to illustrate it with stories and examples, etc., having also looked at the original data and thought about it, it was time well spent in both camps. And so the efficiency, yes, to get something fast, but fact checking it because there were some nuances that the computer could not do. And had
Uh-huh.
I not looked at some of the original data, I would not have caught that nuance. So you can't just do everything. But that was a moment like, okay,
Mm.
maybe I should hit click first and
Yeah.
see what comes up.
I
but
have a
also check and verify.
I have a file. I have a file called article summarization. If I see a research paper that could be 30 pages, I can't read that now. So I'll flip it over, summarize it, and then if it's enough key points as I scan through that, then I will go back and read the article. Kind of the same way
Mhm.
you did in doing that. But again, that's a different skill set. And so as if you could speak to senior executives, a room full of C-suite people, how would you what advice would you give them on developing their workforce, developing their leaders, your communication strategies? You've been doing this for X amount of years. What advice would you give CEOs of companies on developing their workforce, curiosity, all those key things? Is there a few key points that you could talk to as it relates to that?
I would say a couple of things. One is build it into your budget.
Okay.
We fund things that you know what you care about by looking at your budget, what you're willing to invest in. Too often we cut professional development and training when times get tight.
First thing.
And the reality is that's when you need to invest in your talent. Even if you have to cut the number of people that you might have, those people that you keep, you have to invest in and their growth and development. And if that means you're giving them time to explore, read, do an online study, or you're making available the full LinkedIn suite of learning, or you're sending them away to do a deep learning experience, or you get subscriptions or what have you, you've got a budget for that, whether you're budgeting for the time or you're budgeting for the resource, but you need to keep that in your budget, because if you take it out of your budget,
Yeah.
it's not going to get done. And then you're asking people to do more and then they're going to have to take out of their own pocket and time
I know.
to learn to do it.
Yeah. hmm hmm
You
And
got to put it in your
this is what's missing a lot, because what you just gave was kind of a master class in how do you develop a workforce, because the workforce has to get the work done in order for you to meet the targets, so that you can get revenue, profit, and all those things. It all comes back to workers inside your organization. So I want to go back.
I'm sorry, that's a page principle. So the group that I lead, we have things called page principles. Things like tell the truth, prove it with action. If you care about something, you're not going to talk about it. You're going to prove it with action. If you care about your employees, you will prove it with action. And part of that is listening to the stakeholders. If people say, I need help, then you listen and you give them help. Another one is managing for tomorrow. We oftentimes look at our P&L and say, this is what's happening today, but we have to think about what's happening tomorrow. So page principle, manage for tomorrow. Another page principle is, this is a really important one, and this goes back to DE&I. It goes back to workforce development. It is the realize an enterprise's true character is expressed by its people. That's a page principle. And so if you are going to be managing for tomorrow, you got to invest in your people today. And you prove it with action. You can't just talk the game. You need to invest it in your budget. You need to give the time. You got to prove it with action.
I love that. I love prove with action. I said, I write a lot. I love to write when I get stressed or whatever it is. And I said, that's my next topic, but I'll attribute it to you. The residual checks will be coming through the mail or whatever it is.
I got to write my next book.
Yeah. Your next book. Tell us about the first book. Tell us about your next book, what you're thinking about.
People have told me that I need to tell my story of the journey. What are these leadership lessons that I've learned over the years? How do we take and apply like these page principles to life? How to make that next step, and being brave to know what those necessary endings are. I said I was going to do that when I took my leave, and I didn't. but I think it's something that I probably need to get to work on. Maybe you can help me that with Ron. You can pull it out of me.
You know what? I got to outline it. Everything is already outlined, the stages and all. I said, I got an hour. I'm going to do this today. I said, nah, I'm busy. I'll do something else. It's been sitting there for a year. So
yeah.
there's
It's much easier for me to edit other people's work or do an edited volume on sustainability of HBCUs than it is for me to sit down and write my own story.
I know.
I'm too busy living it.
I know. I want to do a quick shout out to some of our listeners. Peter Piccinini, who's he always puts in every Friday. He's a great way to start the weekend. Every Friday, it's the CEO series. And Peter was in the arts in New York, stage management and managed plays and all of that. Now he's in wealth management. Jim Moy, he says good morning from Washington D.C. He doesn't like me to say he's a big shot attorney in Washington D.C. and was my next door neighbor when I lived in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Gladys Diaz says, "What a pioneer, a role model, Duke's." What a pioneer role model that Duke's was. I see Dr. Ford having the same impact in me. Thank you, Gladys, for that rubber stamp of approval. And Yasara says, Dr. Rochelle, hi, I have the same journey from academia to the corporate world. I can relate to your story. So the reason we started the CEO series was to talk about people's careers because it never goes this way. It goes this way, this way, this way, back here, and it keeps going. The trajectory, you can't map it out from coming from university. So that leads me into my next question. If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Great question. Take time to smell the flowers. Enjoy every moment. Enjoy the ride. Like, I think I've always been a striver, and what's next, and enjoying being where you are and fully embracing it. And yes, manage for tomorrow. Absolutely. Yes, have goals, have a plan, but really embrace the here and now. I look at my kids and I'm like, oh, I remember when you were this age and that age and what have you. And I'm like, valuing and enjoying that moment of now is so critical because you don't want to look back and be like, oh, I wish I would spend more time X, right?
Yeah.
But just really embracing the here and now and be grateful for the here and now as you are striving for your goals and making plans for the future. Fully embrace the here and now.
Fully embrace it. I've always said that roadblocks are good. Roadblocks are good for growth. You get that roadblock, you can't figure it out, and maybe you make the wrong turn. Maybe you should have gone this way, and you learn later on you have to recalibrate. I said it's the best learning experience ever.
Hey, fail forward. You learn more when you fail than when you win.
That's exactly right. Well, as we begin to close out, I want to first of all thank you for being a guest on the show. I've been a fan of yours from, I don't know which university it was, and we kind of connected. But I wanted you to come on because of the fact you've had such an amazing career from academia, and now you're the CEO of the Page Society and moving this forward. So is there any thoughts that you'd want to leave the audience for people that are listening in?
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to draw from where you get strength, right? And lean on that. For me, it is faith, right? It's my faith, my relationship with God, me being a Christ follower, and being true to myself and what I feel my calling is, right? And so I think you have to be true to yourself and draw from where you gain strength. And if you don't know what that source is, then start a path of discovery of what that is. And for me, I believe it's a higher calling. And so believe in yourself and draw from where you get that strength. And for me, it's being a Christ follower. And and that's where I get my strength. There's a cause bigger than myself. And then it enables me to tell the truth, to prove it with action, to manage for tomorrow, to really listen to others, because I know I'm not doing a work unto myself. For me, is doing a work unto the Lord, is doing something bigger than that.
Wow. That's a masterclass. That's a masterclass. No, the entire interview was a masterclass. This is why I wanted to have you on, because as I said, your career has just been amazing, and now you're moving all over the globe. Matter of fact, did you go to China yet? I know you just got your China
I
visa.
am heading on this world tour on Sunday. So
Really?
we will start off with the seminar, which is an amazing group. We're meeting in Savannah. And then my mother is going to join me on this business trip, because she has not been to many of these countries. So we're heading to Brussels for the European Association of Communications Directors Conference. Then we're going down to Cannes for the Lions Festival of Creativity in the advertising and PR industries. Then we'll head to Amsterdam for the Page International Exchange. And then we will head over to Tokyo, and I'll be speaking at the Foreign Correspondence Club in Japan. And then we will head to Shanghai and meeting with the Shanghai Public Relations Association, and then heading off to Beijing, and in Beijing, speaking at a university there, meeting with the Chinese International Public Relations Group and the Chinese Public Relations Association. And then Mom and I will go home and sleep.
I know. Yeah, the jet lag is. I was writing down I was just recently in Brussels. I was just recently in Amsterdam. I've been to Shanghai and Beijing numerous times. So I love the international flavor of all of this. So thank you so much.
It's just worldwide, and so I'm looking forward to seeing our members in all of those places.
Yeah, and you could not have done that if you would have not have left university. Not that it was a bad thing, but I would have been there, going there every day. But now I'm global, international. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hang on after we close out, because there's something I want to discuss with you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take the CEO series with you anywhere, anytime. All episodes are now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership.